Welcome back to the Shadows and Ink podcast. This is the start of season 2, and our first episode is all going to be about nautical horror. And our guest is Julie Hiner, and we'll also be talking about her book, Fear of the Deep. So I'm going to let her introduce herself now, so take it away.
Hello, I'm Julie Hiner, and I'm here today to talk about my book called The Fear of the Deep. But up to this point, I've mostly been writing serial killers and detectives, and now I'm starting to branch off into other things like deep sea and wilderness and stuff like that.
Cool. So tell us a little bit about your book, Fear of the Deep.
Well, okay, it is a deep sea horror, but it has a lot of heavy metal influence. I do tend to write stories that are heavily influenced by different types of music. It takes place in San Diego in the mid 80s, and most of the scenes are on the beach, in the ocean, or at the 720 Beach House, which is a live music venue in San Diego. And really, the story is about a young woman named Bailey who's afraid of the open ocean because of a traumatic event from her past. But being a lifeguard, this poses a challenge, clearly. And when a body washes ashore, she sees bite marks and smells an odor that take her back to the day of her accident. The story plays really on the unknown in the deep water. So, I find these things both terrifying and fascinating. And there's so much we really don't know about what's down there. And so that was kind of where I got the idea of being scared of what's down there.
Okay, so why did you want to explore nautical horror in this book?
Well, because I do tend to write things about that explore my own fears, and I will admit I have always been quite terrified of deep open water, primarily because you can't really see, and it's such a foreign environment for us as human beings, really. And I think there's just so much about what's in there that really fosters the imagination to just run wild.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I grew up and I still live in Nova Scotia, so I mean, you can't escape the sea in Nova Scotia. So I don't have a fear of it because I grew up with it. But it. I certainly do have a great respect for it because it is a very dangerous thing. And if you grow up in a place near the ocean that relies on the ocean for fishing and stuff, you realize how dangerous it actually can be. So I understand that quite a bit. So, what is it about the sea that you think resonates with horror as a genre? Do you think it's that element of the dark, cold, unknown, or is there something else to it as well?
I think there it is, and there's more to it too. I think that yes, definitely the the ocean is a foreign world beneath the surface. It's dark, it's cold, and physically we can't survive in there without help. So I think it is definitely naturally a good environment for writing horror stories, but also I think it amplifies human emotion. So because we can't survive in the water without assistance, we are physically wired to react and be afraid of these things that threaten our lives. And so I think there's so much to also play around with from the emotional side of things. And I think that triggering emotions in readers really does result in some of the best horror, quite honestly.
Definitely. So, the main character is a lifeguard, as you mentioned, and that kind of conjures in for a lot of people, a sunny day at the beach. It doesn't conjure horror at all. So, to create a tense or creepy oceanside atmosphere, what did you focus on? Did you go with the physical descriptions or sights, sounds, or did you just kind of meld it all together? So, what was your technique?
Yeah, I do focus a lot on all the senses. So for example, when she's on the beach and a body washes ashore, we have birds pecking at it, things crawling out of it, odors releasing. So you're kind of juxtaposing like the horrors of nature onto the beauty of nature at the same time. But also there are some scenes below the surface where you do have darkness and you have different kinds of noises and the weight of the water pulling you down. So, for some of us, this can really create a suffocating and terrifying environment that we're not comfortable in. And also, her fear in the story also stems from the accident and the person she lost. So she actually has images and sounds and smells that remind her of that day that are part of the story too.
Okay, so as you said, there is a theme of trauma and fear involving the main characters. So how and why did you explore this?
Well, I think like human emotion, again, for me, is at the core of really good horror because it triggers our own fears and feelings that we actually know how it feels like. But also, I think having trauma in any story is really important, or at least something from the character's past that they're still dealing with, something that happened that the readers can understand or relate to. And I think it makes them more interesting, it makes the character more believable, and like I said, it enables readers to connect more with them and to empathize with their solution. Like, for example, if you look at the original Jaws that we all know, really it's about the officer's fear of the water. He's afraid of the water. He's afraid of what's going to happen if his boys go swimming in the water. And a lot of people can relate to that because it's a real human fear and it's based in real emotion. And so it just really connects us with the story and helps to connect us with the characters in it.
Mm. So how much did you pull on your own fear to create her reactions? And how did you create tension when she from her fear of the water to her job as a lifeguard? Because I mean, obviously as a lifeguard, she would have to enter the water at some point. So how did you create that juxtaposition with fear and job?
Yeah. So, I mean, sorry, I think I might have lost you here.
I can still see you.
Yeah, I can't. Oh, I can hear you now. I think maybe we're okay now.
Okay.
No, I think there's kind of an issue with the connection. So I wonder if I
So
should.
how did you how did you create the juxtaposition between the main character's fear and her doing her job in the book?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I do, because she's a lifeguard, she's going to have to go out there sometime, right? So after there is some indication that something is going on in the water, I actually created a reason for her to have to go out there. So then it takes her into the environment that she used to love that now she's turned into something that she's scared of. And it forces her to have to go out there. And of course, then all her memories are coming back about what happened. So the reader can see how hard it is for her to go in there. So she's on the beach and I paint the scene of how beautiful the environment is. And next thing you know, there's something happening. And now she has to go in and then face the, I guess, scarier version of being in the water if you do have those fears, and playing on how you're underneath and it's dark and you can't really see and there's strange sounds and things like that.
Okay, so there's also a sci-fi factor in the book. You're playing around with some genetically engineered creatures. So, which is an interesting variation on the traditional sea monster or underwater threat like sharks that you usually see in horror. So, why did you choose to go in that direction?
Yeah, well, and so it's actually more like mutations between species. So it is scientific. I really had a desire to do a deep sea story, but I didn't really want to do a shark because I mean, it's just been so done, and you can't beat the originals, right? So I wanted to do something a little different, and I really do like in a lot of my writing, I really do like digging into the facts and the research and the science behind it. So I just found it really fascinating to start to dig into what's really in the ocean that we know, and then start to play on, well, what don't we know and what if. So using some of the characteristics and the actual science behind what is down there, and then playing on it and going into that sort of what if world just seemed really fun to me and helped me to create maybe something a little different than what's been done over and over in some of the other stories.
Okay, that sounds like fun actually.
Yeah.
So, you're also playing with concepts of human versus nature, humans overstepping boundaries in science and various things like that. So, did any of these themes arise from today's environmental, social, or ethical concerns?
Yeah, no, not really. And I think because I focused more on how a species might mutate with another species, and it really wasn't human intervention, and there really weren't any issues. But I did that theme of like humans versus the wild, nature, wilderness. I love that because a lot of us do like water, or we do like outdoors, or we do like the forest or the mountains. But the reality is, we can all understand, even if we're not avid outdoors people, that there are real survival dangers. And I think for me, I just love that survival kind of horror where you really are playing on the limitations of us as human beings, physically and mentally, when you're out there. So that was really a strong theme for sure.
Yeah, it definitely does not take much for
No.
a nice nature trip to turn into something quite horrific. And it's interesting that you wanted to play with that. It's so you also mentioned research earlier. So what sort of research did you delve into when you were writing the book? Did you fall down any research rabbit holes?
Yeah, it's kind of addicting watching YouTube videos of things that are in the deep, deep ocean. Because I'm not somebody who has an interest in diving or anything like that. So to be able to see what has been recorded, it's fairly fascinating and terrifying. Some of the characteristics these creatures already have, and then when you start reading about things that have washed ashore that have been photographed, and then, there's that whole factor of like, oh my God, like that was in there and we couldn't see it. And now it's here and we can see clearly that this thing exists and we don't even know what it is.
Mm.
So yeah, I definitely watched a lot of videos and things, and not just because I needed to research, because after a while you just start to kind of get addicted to this.
Yeah, they definitely. I mean, they're still finding new species underwater that they had no idea existed.
Yeah.
Anyway, did you incorporate any of your research of these creature traits into the book?
Yeah, I did. So I specifically used real species and some of their characteristics. And then I did use the idea of how a species does mutate to adapt. And, but also added on, like I said, some kind of more fictional side of things that's a little bit based on what I read, but then you sort of take it into the what if realm.
Yeah, I know with my own nautical fantasy, um, most of my creatures were based on mythological sea monsters, but I did incorporate some real life things like the speed at how an octopus travels, the speed of
Oh, yeah.
so I could gauge the distances these creatures could actually move.
Yeah.
So you do kind of pull in a little bit of real life into even fantasy creatures.
Yeah, for sure. And that makes it a lot of fun.
Yeah. So, what's your favorite scene in the book? One that stuck with you?
Oh yeah, that's a really good question, and of course I do like a few of them, but there's one that really sticks out, and it takes place. So I actually have lived in San Diego, so I tend to use places where I know what they're like. And because it takes place in the mid '80s, there were some places that were there that aren't there anymore. And this particular scene takes place at something that was called the Wave House, and the idea was to simulate the waves of the ocean so that people could practice surfing. And so she's there because she's too afraid to go surfing in the ocean, but she used to love surfing. So part of it is she's starting to face her fears about surfing again. But then the other part of it is, and I mentioned there's a heavy metal aspect. So she does spend a lot of time at live shows, and she does hang out with the bands afterwards, but she never gets close to anybody because she's still traumatized about losing the one person that she was really close to. So she's at the Wave House, she finishes her run, she's with some friends, and then this band walks in, clearly completely out of place compared to all the surfers. And right away, the singer captivates her. So she ends up talking to him. And now what happens is she's also starting to face her fears about feelings for people and getting close to people because she's having these intense reactions to him right from the start. So in that scene, it's a great setting, but also she's facing both her fears at the same time.
Mm, cool. Well, it's nice the way you did that. So, did anything surprise you about the process of writing Fear of the Deep? Was it smooth sailing, or did you run into shoals on the shore, as it were?
Um, what I liked about it, what was easier was I've been doing a lot of novels, and this is a novella, so I think the shorter format I've been really enjoying. Also, as I mentioned, I do write a lot of like serial killers and detectives and investigations, and I found this quite freeing with regards to you don't have to have such a hold on the timelines and the dates. Like every day and every time matters in some of those other books, and even though there was some research, there's the level of detail in the research is quite less when you're not sticking as closely to reality. But I think because it was sort of a new topic for me too, um, the manuscript maybe wasn't as mature as it could have been. Like, I think I've learned a lot of things about how to write this kind of horror as opposed to what I normally write. So there were some challenges there, but I was really excited to be able to do this and really committed to putting in the work to get it where it needed to be. So, challenges are good, right?
Yeah. Okay, so what is it about the horror genre in general that appeals to you as a writer?
Well, I guess I like having a safe place to, or a safe space to explore things that you're really scared of. And I'm not sure if I can fully explain why, but some people like to cry, some people like to laugh, some people like romance, but some of us just really like to feel those fears and that tension when we're watching something or reading something. And I'm just kind of fascinated with that. But also, I think that there's just so much room for imagination in the horror world. And nowadays, some people are getting really extreme with the horror, and I'm starting to get more into the extreme stuff, and it's just wild and crazy and highly, highly entertaining in my point of view. So I'm kind of addicted to the genre both as a consumer and a producer.
Yeah, the gory stuff can be fun, and it's also nice and cathartic if you happen to have a bad day as
Yeah.
well.
Well, an extreme doesn't have to be gore. So, I mean,
Yeah,
I know there's a
that's
lot of
true too.
ways to define it, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that you can have all sorts of it. That's the one thing I like about the horror genre, that there are so many like smaller subgenres of it that you can
Yeah.
explore.
Yeah.
So, do you have a favorite nautical or sea themed book or movie that's your favorite?
Yeah, I still, for book and movie, it's still Jaws for me because I don't know, it's so rooted in the human emotion and the character development. And the book is actually quite different than the movie, so it's really interesting to consume both of them and just sort of think about why they're different and compare them. And I just think for me, it's always going to be a classic. Like, I do like the 70s and 80s stuff, and I don't know, it still holds up for me when I watch it. So I think that'll always be my favorite.
Yeah, definitely, definitely a classic. So, so tell us about some of the other books you've written.
Well, primarily I have focused on my series, which is a detective serial killer, but it's not like a typical murder mystery. It's more of a like Silence of the Lambs or Criminal Minds. So I do a deep mind dive into the serial killer mind and the detective mind, and all of the books in that series are heavily fused with music. So the music is part of the plot and the character development. And the last book, I was able to actually work with a band and a producer to do a custom soundtrack, which I am doing again for the next book. So I'm fusing two of my favorite kinds of art. But I have dabbled in, I did a demon possession book, which was also fused with death metal. So that was kind of a different spin on an exorcism. And I'm dabbling in, or actually working on some wilderness horror with another author now. So because I am a big hiker and cyclist, the forest and the mountains, like, I mean, I love that horror because it's so rooted in what can, like you said, can go very, very quickly when we're limited by our physical abilities.
Yeah. So, what's it like collaborating with another author?
Oh, I just love it. So I actually know a couple of people that have a little publication company. Well, it's growing quite quickly, but they have been collaborating for years with each other. And I started asking them questions because I thought, wow, that's really cool. And so I've done one collaborative thing with an author where we co-created an anthology together, and it just went so well. We were really good at working together, and we've got to know over the years. So now we are working on this wilderness thing, and the writing is fairly far in. And for us, our process is to go back and forth. So there's different ways of doing it, but I really love when you do have a partnership and you know the person, you can trust them, and you know you work well together. You can plan out kind of what you're going to do, but then when you send them something and they go, "Oh my God, what did you do?" and they love it, and then they send you back and you don't exactly know what they're going to write. It's really exciting, and it stimulates my creativity, and it's really fun actually to work with someone else because like I'm getting at the very end of my next book here, and it can be really lonely when you're in the throes of finishing the editing and getting the book together, and I'm sure you know, and you're by yourself all the time doing this work. So it's really quite inspiring and a lot of fun to work with someone else, for sure, if you have the right connection with them to have that back and forth like that.
Okay, so you mentioned this project. Is that coming out soon, or do you have anything else coming out?
That one will be a little while yet, but I do have the sixth novel in my serial killer series coming in April. So I'm just actually working on the book cover and stuff like that right now. So, and there will be, it's basically Iron Maiden power metal meets Iron Maiden torture. So it's a very interesting fusion, and it's very dark and very delicious. And it's going to actually be like the last in that series because I'm going to be moving into other things. So, I'm excited about it, but yeah, it's maybe a little sad too because sometimes it's time to move into another direction with your creativity.
Yeah, it's always kind of sad when a series ends or wraps up
Yeah,
naturally. So yeah, although the double Iron Maiden thing sounds very interesting, I gotta say. So
yeah.
okay, so I think we'll wrap the interview up here, and I'd like to thank you for being a guest. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and great questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, and so that's it for this episode of Shadows and Ink. And join us for another episode in season 2 in February. So bye for now.